the most sacred of relationships, yet time and life make it fragile. Love, trust, respect, and desire, all elements of a successful marriage. Yet so many of us along the way forget. We lead busy lives. We go through changes, big and small. We build walls to protect ourselves. It does not have to be this way. There are clear and exciting ways to bring your marriage and life back on track. Welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast with Stuart Fensterheim.
Good morning and welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast. I really want to just share with all of you how touched I am that you guys join me every single week to really listen to this podcast. And what's so exciting about that is that my journey is really helping couples establish a close connected relationship where both of you really feel so important to each other, and knowing that by coming to this podcast every single week, what you guys really demonstrate to me, and I know to your partners, is that you care so much about the relationship that you're doing the work that's necessary to really have that kind of relationship. I want to remind all of you that I do a YouTube channel, the Couples Expert YouTube, where I have videos on relationship topics. In addition, at my website, which is www.thecouplesexperts, you can sign up for a tip of the day that I call Stuart's Daily Notes. Here you will get 5 videos a week. Each video is about 2 to 3 minutes that the two of you can watch in the morning, and it gives you a tip of something you can do today to try to help your relationship be the best relationship possible. In that light, I want to introduce you to my guest today. My guest today is Nicole Burgess. Nicole is a friend of mine who I've met online, and I've done some workshops with her. We went to a podcasting conference together, and we've done just some really nice things together that really has allowed me to get to know her and the quality of her skills as well as her heart. Because Nicole is someone that really cares about the people she works with, and what she's agreed to do is come on this show and talk about mindfulness. Nicole is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and also what's exciting about this interview is that Nicole is a fellow podcaster, and it's always fun to talk with folks that also are in the grind, doing what I do, and really sending a clear message out to her audience. And what she does is she works with teenage girls and women overcoming anxiety, perfectionism, and really rediscovering the joy in their life. What she offers to Indiana and California residents in office and also online therapy, and why that's important to state, is it means that she's doing something a little different than most. And what I'd like to do is bring people on my show and really have a heart-to-heart talk about topics that are going to really help you and me and the world really have relationships that are different. And what we're going to be talking with Nicole about today is really a concept of empowerment and mindfulness. Mindfulness is a term that's thrown about quite often, and I want to talk about how does that topic really help you and your family. So Nicole, welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on, Stuart. I'm very excited about today's episode.
Yeah, I am too, because mindfulness is really an area that I wanted to really understand a little bit better. And one of the things I like to do before we get into the topic is really introduce you to my audience. And one of the best ways of doing that is, you and I work in this crazy field. And
yes,
it really is sort of a little bit different. You get people who say, I can't believe you do that. How do you listen to people all day? And then you get others that say, oh, I really respect what you do. And others say, I don't know, I can't believe you get paid for what you do. It's a whole spectrum. So I want to understand for you personally, how you really decided to go into this field. And in particular, I know your specialty is working with teenage girls, and how you what your path was to get there.
Sure. And yes, what you just described, there is a whole spectrum of what feedback I get being a therapist. Yes, definitely true. So true. So I guess my background is really, I came from the business world. I used to work in the corporate world, and I've done various things from accounting to software implementations. And it didn't matter where I went. Often our field, you will hear people say it's been a calling. And I think that is so true for me. It didn't matter where I worked, it didn't matter what location I was at. People would come and just sit and tell me what was going on. And I could be standing in the library, I could be standing in a grocery line, and I'd have complete strangers talk to me. So I thought, I think it's about time I get a little more training what all this is to be able to put more of kind of a container around it for folks. And I think it's a very incredible field to work in, and truly such a privilege to work with all the clients that I've had that trust in me to hold them where they are and to move forward. And my journey to get to where I am today, where I work a lot with the teen girls and women, as you talk about, with going from being overwhelmed with anxiety to more joyful living and thriving again, it's been a journey in the sense where I started out working a lot with families and little kids. And then I slowly have, over the years, I've really enjoyed working with teenagers. And a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, that's a challenging age. And it is. But what I love about the work I do is really working with the girls, their parents, and women who really get stuck in this mindset of they have to be perfect, that they are not allowed to make mistakes, that they do a lot of people pleasing behaviors, meaning I lose part of me. I go along with what everybody else wants to do versus having my own voice. And when I work with them, it's so incredible to witness their shift, that their confidence level goes up, that they begin to really thrive again in their life. And when they set healthy limits, they're unstoppable. And so for me, it's just so cool to watch them go from kind of feeling like I don't have any power to going to being really more empowered in their life and making that transition for themselves.
That's really neat. And when you start talking about empowerment, it's a really interesting thing, especially if you're talking about with women. And one of the things that I talk with the families, particularly those that have young children, is really facing the concept that you really have two jobs if you're a working family.
Yes.
That you have a job at home and then you have a job when you walk in the door. And I find, men have such an easier time, I think, shifting and going, I'm home, I'm going to relax a little bit. But the women come home and they jump right in. And the problem is there's this expectation they have of themselves that they can do it all.
Yes.
That they can work, a 12-hour day, be a top executive somewhere, come home, and they're going to be able to do all the things that they do at home and never burn themselves out. And that doesn't usually pan out, does it?
Correct. And I'm sure with all the work you have done with couples, when there's expectations that are not voiced, that's where a lot of the conflicts happen. And so if people, whether it's, the wife or it's the husband, if they don't have that mindfulness or being present is where I call what mindfulness is, being present, and they don't know their inner needs or wants, then they can't articulate that to their partner to say, here's where I'm struggling, here's where I need help, or here's how you can support me.
And then the other piece, and I want to have you sort of really define the mindfulness for a second, but the whole concept, I think sometimes more than partner having these expectations, it's the self that has the expectation that gets in the way. And not only are they not verbalizing to their partner their needs, they're not asking themselves the questions, can I do it all?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for those in my audience that really don't know that term, it's a term that's been thrown around quite a bit. How do you actually define what mindfulness is? I know you said it's being present, but can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So mindfulness, when I teach clients this, it's more of being in the moment. It's really letting go of those future expectations It's about truly being in your body, not just in your head, in your body, and being with that person or your surroundings, wherever you may be. So, for example, if you're with your family and you all are having dinner together, you are truly in the moment of you can hear what is going on. It's the observation piece without judging it. It's tasting the food as if it's like the first time you've tasted it. So you're really allowing yourself to feel all that you're in without losing yourself and going, well, I've got the laundry to do after this. Okay, the kids got to be to bed by this time or blah, blah, blah. There's where you're now in the future. Mindfulness is truly being in your body, the full you, and being present in that moment.
So here's where what gets interesting about this for me. So in the moment, for some families, isn't so good.
Correct.
So if I'm in the moment and I have a child having a temper tantrum, a 2-year-old on the floor, I don't like that moment.
Right.
So what do we do about that?
So often what I will tell parents when they have the little ones like that, it's when they're little kids, there's what's called dysregulation. They do not know how to self-soothe. They don't know how to calm themselves down. And if the parents are in this place where they get really worried, anxious, stressed out because their child is having that meltdown, taking some deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, again, getting out of your head, because that's where the fear really likes to stay. And then it gets bigger and bigger. And I call it keeps creating a story in your mind like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever. This is just embarrassing. This is whatever it may be. When you get deeper into your body, where you take that deep breath and you can feel it through your stomach versus your chest, you start to calm down. You're not engaging with your kid in the sense where you're not reinforcing that behavior they're doing in that moment. And oftentimes the child will begin to calm down because they're not getting the engagement from the parent. If a parent's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You can't do this. This is awful. You need to behave. What are you doing? It's going to amp up their anxiety. And then it's going to escalate sometimes the meltdown behavior. And oftentimes when the kid is having that meltdown, all they're wanting is reassurance that they're okay, that they may not get what they want in that moment, but that you're still there and you still love them, and that's it. So oftentimes they may just ask, like, do you need a hug right now? And for some kids, they honestly, when they're flailing about, having that hug, it's a sensory issue, and that can help calm them down. Other times, your kiddo may just need, they just need a few moments just to kind of have that cry, and they'll eventually calm themselves down, and then you can have some dialogue with them after that.
What's really interesting about that is I recall the story of my daughter, who is now in her 20s, when she was about 7, having a total meltdown in the middle of the grocery store.
Yep.
And the looks I was getting from everybody around me. And one of the hardest things for me was, what do I do? Because what I thought was the right decision would not publicly go over very well. And I might view myself, and I might be viewed by others, now I'm talking about being in my head now, that I would be a terrible parent. The decision I wanted to do is basically pick her up, throw over my shoulder, and drag her out of the store and take her home. But I knew what she would do if I did that was scream louder, kick me, be screaming like I was killing her. And how will people react to that? That was not being mindful. So I think that's a good example, of exactly what you're talking about, because logical decision-making goes out the window if you start having all this anxiety about what do I do.
And, I think what you've also hit upon, Stuart, there is so much of the fear of being judged by others, like I'm going to be a bad parent. And then that comes into the shaming part of it.
Right.
You're not a bad parent if your kiddo has a meltdown. They could be hungry. They could be extremely tired. People don't know the behind the scenes of what led up to where you are. And as the parent of, oh, okay, I kind of see how this was unfolding. I did 5 different errands under an hour, and my daughter, she's just done.
Yeah,
So
she's
there,
done. She's done.
yeah. But then as adults, right, we're like, oh, I just got one more thing to do, one more thing to do. That's where that mindfulness goes in. It's like you can be tuned into your little ones to go, you know what? This isn't worth it. That it's okay if I do need to scoop her up and just walk out. And if she escalates, okay. But I keep saying, taking those deep breaths to stay centered, even though that can be really challenging at times, and leave. Or I can make that decision. I know she's not tired. I know she really just wanted that candy bar, and I told her no.
Right.
And so she's going to do this for the next 5 minutes. I'm just going to keep looking down that aisle of going, okay, the next thing we got to get is this, and this on the list. She'll let me know when she's done, and I'll tell her, hey, when you're done, let me know. I'm going to be over here. Just you could take even a few steps away. It'll work out, but it never, ever makes you a bad parent if your kiddo just is like, oh, I'm having a hard time right now in this moment.
Right. And being in the moment is literally being in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key from what I'm hearing you say, that if I do anything other than what I think is the right decision for her and I right now, in almost like we're in this bubble and there's nothing else around us, if I let all of these other influences, I can't be really present with her emotionally. And that's really what she needs, even if she's screaming.
Correct. Because then it goes back to the people pleasing, right? I'm somehow now telling myself I've got to be responsible for everybody else's experience of what is going on. And that's not your responsibility.
And then part of being in the moment, I would imagine, is also being in touch with what you need at that moment.
Correct. Absolutely.
So when we talk about families, and we talk about whether we're talking about blended families or we're talking about single parent families or we're talking about your traditional mom and dad being together with the kids, sometimes the needs of the family really can be overwhelming because there's so many needs. Staying in the moment with the family, how do you do that?
So I encourage folks to create some sort of mindfulness practice. And it's really what you had talked about at the very beginning of the episode, where if I don't know what I need, then I can't do any requesting. I can't put it out there of what works and what doesn't work for me. So when I give myself pause, and for mindfulness practices, I know a lot of times people are like, Nicole, I am not going to sit here in a chair with, my middle finger and my thumb touching going om. I'm like, you don't have to. That's one form of a type of meditation or a type of mindfulness. A lot of times going out in nature, reconnecting there, observing your surroundings, not judging it, just observing it, you get to go to a place again within, and different things will start to bubble up. And I will, if the stress level is so high in the family, I will encourage that parent to really take some moments, 5, 10, 15 minutes, if they can, before everybody gets up, take some of that quiet time. If it's reading an inspirational book that gets them going in the morning, if it's them just slowly drinking their coffee or tea in the morning, all of that's about being mindful. It's being in the moment. So your mindfulness practice can look a lot of different ways. I am not consistent with sitting for 5, 15, 20 minutes truly meditating, but I will do a walking meditation. I can do a sitting meditation. I can do a journaling meditation. There's a lot of different ways to go within and be present.
One of the things that I read recently was, I think it's a form of Zen Buddhism, which is called walking mindfulness, which is you basically walk. And as you're walking, the only focus is on each foot as it comes down on the ground. And I tried it, and I was amazed how just fulfilling and relaxing it was.
Yeah.
And it's sort of what you just described, I think. It's, going out in nature and doing those things. And I think one of the questions that people have is when they hear about mindfulness, they do think that this is sort of this, I don't know, free to be you and me, and this sort of weird spiritual meditation. And what I'm hearing you say, it isn't really that.
Correct. If you want it to be that, you can absolutely create that. But in my mind and the way I teach it, there's a lot of different ways to be mindful. And you have to find the way that works really for you and your family.
So if someone did want sort of meditation to be part of this, are there techniques that people can use to help them meditate? Because I know that there's a lot of people, especially, if you have a colicky baby or if your family is really dysfunctional, it's how do I just calm myself down?
So, yeah, some of those practices, for some folks, they really want to get in a place of it's truly quiet. And then they're going to sit and breathe in through their nose, out through their mouth, and it's truly the belly breathing. So I'll tell them, count in for 4 as you inhale, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then hold for 4 again. That really, you start to practice being mindful of just your breathing. So again, those thoughts can go through your mind, but you don't hold on to them. You don't get attached to them. For other folks, that actually can cause a lot more anxiety for them. So they can do guided meditations. There's a lot of different ones out there on like YouTube. I recommend like Tara Brach, which is Brach.
Okay,
It's her
great.
last name. And you could, again, on YouTube, there could be just visualization guided meditation. So if you're visually oriented, sometimes seeing a picture or seeing a scene in nature, and then there's different music that's playing, and then they'll guide you through how to slowly get more connected to your body. So there's different things. Or if you just want, like if your baby is really colicky and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so exhausted. Sometimes it's putting on some calm music and just paying attention to your breathing.
So you mean the Grateful Dead's not a good idea, I guess?
Well, again, if your anxiety is really high and that works for you, great, but the odds are not so much. And I know for some folks that calming music may not work. So if that anxiety, like I've had other conversations with music therapists and we were talking, it's like when that anxiety stress level is really high, sometimes having like percussions and lots of drums and things like that, that can help bring that anxiety level down. So again, when you tune into yourself, you start to get a better understanding of what works for you and then how you bring that to the family, because you're then role modeling that to your kids. You're also role modeling that to your partner.
Right. And so it really is sort of trial and error in trying to figure out what's really going to work for you. So you started talking about your partner and relationships, and family relationships is an area that I work a lot in and my audience is really interested in. How could you use this in helping the relationships in the family?
So I think one of the most powerful ways when I've worked with families is having that mindfulness around meal times, where they really are, instead of, our society, man, we are known to we kind of slurp down the food and poof, we're on to the next thing. There's various activities going on. So I get families can't consistently make a meal time every single evening or even in the breakfast time. So pick something maybe once or twice a week. And then you kind of set this expectation with the family of, hey, when we're going to do a check-in, we're going to talk about the highs of the day, the lows of the day or the week, whatever. And then you slow down the eating. Truly chew your food like 25 times. Actually taste it. All of that is really great ways to slow things down and to stay connected, truly, truly connected. So that's one way they can do it. When partners are having conversations with one another, it's kind of like you kind of set your agenda to the side. So set that part of your brain who's like, well, I got to hurry up and have my defended answer. I've got to have my agenda going in here. It's like, nope, I'm coming in with a blank slate. I am truly curious about what it is they want to say to me, whatever it may be. And when they're grounded, meaning in their body, and they're centered, you're able to go to a deeper level with your partner because you're not all up in your head trying to have the response before the person actually says anything.
Yeah, I love that you just said that, because as you were talking, I was thinking this exact thing with couples. When you're triggered, you get all worked up and you start having all of these awful thoughts about your partner, or you're already, as soon as someone opens their mouths to doing the comeback. That part of what I teach is really helping couples that when you're engaged in a dialogue, the only agenda is understanding what your partner is saying, not having a response. The more you can just stay present, or I'm going to use your term, the more you can stay mindful, you can really have an experience with your partner where both people feel acknowledged, heard, and understood. And that alone can change a relationship.
Oh my gosh, totally. I mean, that's such the depth, right? It's like you start out on one level when you started the conversation, and then when you go in that place of curiosity and wanting to learn, to understand, you've just dropped your relationship to another level.
And
Which
you
is
drop your
incredible.
guard if you really
Yeah.
believe, and I think most people do, if your partner is really being present or mindful, you sense it in your entire body that they want to connect with you and they want to understand you because no one's more important to them. And when you're distracted or when you have all these other things going on in your head, then the experience is quite different. And one of the things you were mentioning a moment ago, which I was sort of thinking, it's really sad when you were talking about the example with the meals and chewing and being really present on the food. And so often over the last probably decade, you hear all these families that almost never sit down and have a meal together. It's on the run. You got the kids in sports. You got this going on, people on their phone, people on their iPad, and there's never really that family meal. And I think that's where things like some faith issues help, because people go to church, for example. Quite often you hear what we do is we go to church and then we sit down and have lunch together. Those kinds of things really are being mindful to your family. And it's really, I think it's, if I want to get on a different mission, I think one of my next mission may be having families have family meals. And how that can really change the nature of a lot of things.
And I could not agree with you more, Stuart. It really, there has been a shift over the last decade. And I've even worked with the families that, I've watched how over the years, the sports activities and the practices and the demands on the kids and the families, they have really changed. So the kids are exhausted, the parents are exhausted, and having a meal together, it builds the community, but it also builds that strength within the family of a foundation. Like we all can be present and we can all have a voice and be heard in what's working and what's not.
Right. So if someone has this experience that their family is clearly not utilizing mindfulness, what would be some of the steps that you'd recommend to help them begin this process?
So I'm a huge advocate of family meetings. So if something isn't working so well in the family, I encourage, whether it's the kids that bring it up to the parents or the parents bring it up to the kids saying, hey, on this date at this time, I would like to hold, a 30-minute family meeting to talk about X issue. And then you really discuss that. So if you've not done mindfulness and, prior to this, or you've not done a lot of meal times prior to this, because you're going to start to shift what that looks like for the family, you want to first let everybody know why you want to change it, what's working, what's not, and vice versa. If the kids are saying, I'm just missing having time at home, because there is that. I mean, they do miss that. It's being able to set that and to be intentional about what you want to have different in your family, and then create the plan on how you're going to make that different.
I use the term a lot with couples of having an intentional relationship. To have one where you intentionally look to the positive, intentionally see what your partner is doing, and choosing the positive end before the negative end. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Because if everybody's like, I'm just missing the connection and I want to stay caught up in what's going on, and it's like, because I love you so much, I don't want to keep missing more. And so I really want to honor and celebrate where you are in your life and this journey and where we are as a family. Yeah, it's absolutely being intentional. And I know Goldie Hawn actually has a book that I've recommended over the years. And if I remember correctly, it's like the 10 minutes of mindfulness. And she gives an exercise about actually, meal times and chewing food and having kind of an experiment around the table where, if you eat a raisin or you pick something, you got to describe it to somebody as if they've never had it before. And that's a challenge. So yeah, it's going back to being mindful and being intentional.
And also, I think that's a challenge because I think we make these assumptions in our relationships with our families that we know people really well and that what our assumption is about them is factual when it's usually, when you really pull it apart, far from it. It's actually a misinterpretation. And if we could really stay mindful, we don't make those kinds of erroneous assumptions, I think.
Beautifully said. It's all about getting that clarity and going, wait a minute, I think I heard you say this, or this is how I interpreted that. And yeah, when we get that clarity, it's like, oh, you didn't mean that at all. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the experience I get quite often, I'm sure you do in your office as well, when you really do that, people look at each other and go, oh, I didn't know you felt that way too.
Yes.
And then it brings that bond together where we're now working as a couple, as a family, as a team to have the kind of family relationships that all of us want, which is to feel important.
Yes, absolutely.
This episode is sponsored by Stuart's Daily Notes. Stuart's Daily Notes is an email newsletter from the couples expert that will improve your marriage in 5 minutes a day. Small things can have a big impact on your relationship over time. Sign up for Stuart's Daily Notes. It's a resource of tools, videos, exercises, and more. All done by the couples expert, Stuart Fensterheim, with 30 years of clinical experience working with couples. Delivered straight to your inbox. The best part about it, it's free. Sign up today. Go to www.thecouplesexperts.com and change your relationship every single day of your life together. Well, Nicole, we're just about out of time, and I really appreciate all your insights, and you give of yourself so easily. If people want to get hold of you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
So they could go out to my website, which is Nicole, Nicole, and then the letter C as in cat, and then Burgess, BURGESS.com. And they can find out more information about me, or they can go out to the Launching Your Daughter podcast and listen to some of those episodes.
That's terrific. So before you go, I'd like to ask a final question of my guests, which is, you've been doing this work now for a while. As you've been sort of having the experiences that you've had, I know for myself, there's things that have always surprised me about me doing this work. What is something that you sort of, an experience that you had in your own life that, or something as you're doing this work that surprised you about yourself?
Oh, beautiful question. When I was growing up, I didn't hear so much about this whole mindfulness practice. And I heard more about it when I went to grad school. And to me, being able to have that practice, to be able to go more within and being intentional with getting to know myself more, it is amazing the transformation that I have gone through and how I hold that space for my clients. Because to me, there's so much power in this silence and going inward that I encourage everybody to be able to take those small moments of time to go within.
And have you found doing that yourself, you've learned something about yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I know more about kind of what makes me, I want to say, kind of tick. I get a better understanding like, ooh, if I just say yes over here, is that really in alignment with what works for me? Or do I truly need to say no because I'm already kind of stretched and I need to pause for a moment? So yeah, having that practice myself has helped me with better creating limits and boundaries around both personal and professional.
Well, thank you again, Nicole. I just want to reiterate how much and how honored I was that you agreed to come on the show, share yourself, share your time, and most importantly, share with my audience. So thank you again for coming.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Stuart. And I so hope that, your audience really finds some great nuggets in here, and keep doing what you're doing because you're offering so much value to everybody.
Thanks a lot. And we'll see all of you next week for our next episode of the Couples Expert podcast. If you want to communicate with me, you can always reach me at podcast at thecouplesexperts.com. And we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. This episode has ended, but your journey continues. Head over to www.thecouplesexperts.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. Enjoyed this episode? Why not hit subscribe now and never miss an episode?